Cairo, Seattle.
It's time to get schooled with the professor, John Clayton.
Welcome to Schooled with the Professor, and what we're going to do in this edition may be one of the most interesting things we've done on this podcast, because I had the fortune, moving out here in 1986, to cover one of the greatest football players I can remember, Kenny Easley. Kenny Easley was as hard a hitting a safety as you're ever going to find. A guy who just really epitomized the game of football. A guy that was direct. He knew exactly what he was. He was an MVP one year, defensive MVP. And then probably the second toughest story I've had to deal with covering the NFL. The toughest one I had to cover was Glenn Montgomery. He was a defensive lineman for the Seahawks, and he had ALS. And I found out about it back in, in January, and people gave me the ability to write the story, but I elected to hold on to it until I could get a direct confirmation and the approval to do the story from either Glenn, his family, even people around him said, write the story. And I eventually wrote the story, but it was so tough because of how tough that illness is. The second toughest story was to find out that Ken Easley, one of the great players in this league, had a kidney problem that ended his career after 7 years. One that I remember covering the playoff game. He was going against Houston, and I was looking, and boy, Ken looks so big. I mean, he probably got maybe 10 pounds, and it was water weight. And it turned out it affected his ability to move around. His kidney ailment was not known, but he felt that he just didn't feel right. So the Seahawks end up trading him to the Cardinals. And what happens next was incredible. He fails the physical because of the kidneys. He gets back to Seattle and then thought he was going to be with the team. And then all of a sudden he realizes his career is over. And I remember specifically, I had such a good relationship and respected him so much, and he was nice enough to me, meeting him in a Kirkland restaurant to go over the whole story and then try to break down what ended up happening. And again, how sad it was, because one of the reasons that Ken Easley has not made the Pro Football Hall of Fame was because how short his career was. And it wasn't his fault. I mean, his way that he played, the way that he hit, had an impact on him because, just to take the Tylenol and things that he needed just to kind of get through a practice and all that stuff, ended up doing damage to his kidneys theoretically. And then what happens next is that the kidneys just stop functioning on the right plane to a point where he had to get a kidney transplant and have been getting 2 kidney transplants. And 7 years when you're talking about a career compared to a lot of other players at, 12 years, 13 years, you're in there trying to, have a debate on who's the best players. And certainly one of the best players I did cover and see was Kenny Easley. But that 7-year career hurt his chances of making the Hall of Fame and also being a safety. Safeties can have such great impact. Obviously, he had great impact because he was an MVP. But what happens is that they kind of play toward the back of the field, and there's only about 8 safeties in the Pro Football Hall of Fame now, which is kind of an injustice as it is. And now, after 25 years, the senior committee, and I'm not a member of the senior committee, but I 100% support the work that they do. We all try to vote in who the senior committee gives us, and they gave us Ken Easley this year. So it's going to be a thrill and a privilege to go down to Houston and have the opportunity and ironically, the place of his last game, because that was a playoff game against Houston and physical game, all that type of stuff. And that's where his career unfortunately ended. And he finds out about it 3 months later. And I guess it's very fortunate that with that trade, it allowed him to find out what was really wrong. I mean, he may not have found that, but he failed the physical because of the kidney problem, and then found out that things were bad. He ended up having to eventually go to dialysis and all that stuff. And it's fortunate that here he is, 58 years old. He's still living. He's still as spry as ever, and is still as good as ever. And it's like it's going to be such an honor to be part of fixing something that needed to be fixed for some time, getting Ken Easley into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. But his career, and if you look and see, he was at a time where there's so many good safeties. From Ronnie Lott to Dennis Smith to Steve Atwater. So many great safeties around, and he was the toughest of the group. He was the one that made the plays, had the range, had the ability to read the plays on the field and just do it, and to a point where literally strategically teams had to take the position of altering the way the game went because to get him away from the action, because they feared him as far as his hits, they feared him as far as his playmaking ability, and also just what he can do. He was a great leader for the Seattle Seahawks. He was the man on that team, and he was the guy that you would always look to as far as what was going to happen in the game. You've seen it with this group of players. There's so many good ones on the current Seahawk group, but he was such an icon on this team. Again, a leader, a guy that played football the way it was meant to be played, the physical nature. It was physical, but he was always with clean, hard hits. And whoever got those hits paid a price because, he would hit so hard and do it so legally. But what a great player. And we are so pleased to be able to tell you the Ken Easley story with only one thing that hasn't been completed. And that comes out the day before the Super Bowl when the senior committee then presents Ken Easley and we vote yes or no. I think it's safe to say, you know what my vote is. It's a yes. And we want to get that yellow jacket on him coming up in the summer in Canton, Ohio, and having one of the great players, not just safeties, one of the great players in the game, getting the recognition he deserves. We recognize him next. We talk to Ken Easley. Kenny.
Hey, John, how you doing?
Good. How you been?
I've been well, thank you.
Well, that's great. All good with your health?
Yeah, getting stronger, getting better.
Oh, fantastic. Well, congratulations. I cannot wait to get to the Super Bowl and complete what's been long overdue.
Well, thank you. Hopefully I'll get enough votes to get in. I can't believe that you got in the Hall of Fame before I did.
I know. It's life is unfair. Can you believe that? Talk about the great injustices of the world. Okay, are you ready to go here?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. In 3, 2, 1. I can't tell you what a thrill it is to be able to talk to Kenny Easley, who I'm looking so forward to in a couple weeks, getting down to the Super Bowl on a Saturday and being in the Pro Football Hall of Fame room and having the opportunity to have what's been long overdue, getting Ken Easley into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And so, Ken, thanks for joining us. And, boy, what an honor we're looking forward to coming up in a couple weeks.
Well, John, first of all, it's a great pleasure to talk to you again. It's been quite a while. Looking forward to the weekend. Hopefully, I'll get the 80% required for induction, and got my fingers crossed. Basically, it's been a long time coming to get to this point.
What will it mean to you to wear that yellow jacket, be out there, and be honored as one of the greats of the game?
Well, I would imagine that the significance of it will be that. I would be considered one of the greats to play the game, and that's a unique experience, I would imagine, to wear that yellow jacket and be amongst the game's greats. So I am, cautiously excited because I know that a vote has to take place in order for me to get in. But after 25 years or so, thinking that I would never get in, this moment is just going to be cherished one way or the other.
And that's the thing. The senior committee is the one that proposed this. And, of course, different than any of the votes in the 25 years is the fact that it's a yes or no. And so with 80% just having to say yes, and there's certainly going to be a great push to be able to do that. But it's so unusual because one thing that's unique about the Hall of Fame, and it's probably unfortunate, that not enough safeties have been able to go in. I think I can maybe count 8 or 9 safeties, including Ronnie Lott, that's been able to go in. And, when you're sitting there every year, and you got 15 guys that you're voting on, and you can only take 5 in. It just seems like the safety position has been cut short as far as its recognition, and that's kind of a sad part of it all.
Well, I was doing an interview yesterday with Steve Hartman in San Diego, and he put a similar question to me about the lack of safeties that have been in the Hall of Fame. And I said to him, I really believe that the safety sort of is a unsung hero in the sense that the only time you really read about safety is if they make a bone-jarring tackle on a receiver coming across the middle, and, they might get some mention from the broadcasters. But otherwise, you don't hear that much about safety. Unlike the corner position where you have these matchups from, with corners and receivers, it's easy to make those analogies and those comparisons because it's mano a mano, corner versus receiver. Whereas safeties don't have that, that dichotomy. So basically, we just toil in anonymity. And but if you look at what the safety does in terms of, he's the guy to make all the secondary adjustments. When you basically see a receiver running, scot-free in the secondary, it's probably because the free safety or the strong safety has made the wrong call. So the safety has a special position on the team, and also they're the last line of defense. You have to be a sure-handed tackler to make sure that you get that guy down by any means necessary in the secondary. So I just see the safety as being sort of unsung.
No question. And, of course, when you played, there were so many good safeties around, much like you, the Dennis Smiths, the Steve Atwater. There were so many good safeties. When your playing time was there, it was kind of a golden age for safeties.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys. In fact, there's a few that's going to be considered the same weekend that I'll be considered. I think Atwater and John Lynch or Brian Dawkins are a few of the names that are going to be considered this weekend. So it would be a beautiful thing if all the safeties got voted in this weekend to right and injustice for the safeties over the last 20 or 30 years or so.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right about that. How do you look back on your career?
Well, it was a good career in 7 years. The thing that I think is most significant is that after the 84 season, when I was Defensive Player of the Year, most of the teams that we played against in 85, 86, 87 were going to make sure that Kenny Easley didn't have a similar type 84 season. So they split the tight end out to the sidelines, and knowing that the strong safety has to go out there with him, and basically decided that they were going to play 10-on-10 football. And so, that's basically what happened, in 85, 86, and 87. I've, recently have been talking to, folks about the fact that that's how most of the teams decided that they were going to account for me by placing me out on the sideline with a tight end. But ordinarily, they played 11-on-11 football. They were going to have to account for me in some way. So they just decided that they were not going to account for me.
And, of course, that's the great thing because, not only did you make big plays, but, boy, could you hit. That's the one thing that was just amazing to watch, the big hits, the big delivery and all that stuff. And I know just from covering those games, that was so much fun to watch.
Well, I appreciate that. And all of that stuff comes at a price. So those big hits do not do you any justice in the latter years. And I'm certainly in my latter years, being 58 in a couple of days, all of those hits come back to manifest itself on your body.
And then the unfortunate part, I mean, that it manifests itself so early in your career in the sense that I still remember covering that playoff game down in Houston. And of course, you had grown bigger at that time because of what we find out to be the kidney problem. And you're out there in a playoff game just kind of running around doing the best you can. Did you sense then what it was ending up coming?
Well, I sensed then that something was wrong, and terribly wrong, because typically when I hit people, it didn't hurt me. It hurt the guy that I hit. And I remember telling my wife that there's something wrong with me because when I hit people, it hurts me. That was the first thing. Second thing was that in that particular game that you're talking about, a running back came around the end. We were in short yardage defense, and they ran around my end. And I couldn't move fast enough to tackle the guy. And, I mean, when I was healthy, that would have been a slam dunk tackle. I mean, I could have made that tackle with my eyes closed. But I couldn't get to the guy. And that was when I knew that something was really terribly wrong with me. Because I couldn't make the simple plays that I ordinarily would make.
And then, it turns out that they trade you to the Cardinals. You take a physical, and then you find out there was something wrong.
Yeah, I mean, the doctors, I took the physical in the morning, and I went back to my room. The doctor said that we'll come in and talk to you after we get the results of blood tests and all the other stuff that we, typically do for a physical. I said, no problem, so I'm sitting in the room watching TV, waiting for the knock at the door. The doctor, the general manager, and the team trainer comes in the room, and immediately I could sense that something was wrong. And the doctor tells me, says, I'm just going to just get right to it. You failed the physical. And I said, why? He says, you have a really serious kidney ailment that, in fact, we need to put you in an Arizona hospital right now. I said, no, we're not going to do that. I said, I got a wife that's sitting at home who's pregnant with our first child. And I don't want her to hear this news because she wouldn't take it well. And I don't want this to interfere with her pregnancy. So I'm going back to Seattle. I appreciate you telling me this, but I'm going back to Seattle. Jump on the airplane, fly back, and apparently the doctors had already, at least the Cardinals administration had already called the Seahawks and told them that I had failed the physical. And for whatever reason, the Seahawks general manager calls and tells the press that I failed the physical, and that it was non-football related. And I didn't find this out until a couple of days later. And that really pissed me off, because for him to say that this was non-football related was basically going to throw me under the bus and leave me out there by myself. And that's the reason why I filed the lawsuit, because he didn't have to say that. Basically he was trying to keep me from filing a disability claim for this illness. And I don't know why he took that position. It wasn't going to cost the Seahawks any money. It was going to come from the National Football League. And so when he made that statement, like I said, it really pissed me off. And I got with Lee Steinberg and my financial advisor, and we said, let's sue him, because this was definitely something that was caused by your football experience.
Yeah, because, what it comes down to is that here you were delivering all those hits for all the years, trying to maintain the ability, with either taking aspirin, pain pills or whatever, not pain pills, but it's like just taking the things just to kind of keep you normal, and it ended up costing you. And, of course, it's all football related. That's the thing that's so sad about this. Non-football related, please.
Yeah, like I said, that was the thing that pissed me off, because if I had this kidney condition, and if it wasn't football related, I was really prepared to just walk away from the game and find some other vocation. But when, like I said, the general manager says that this was not football related, I mean, I cannot tell you how mad that made me.
Aside from the anger, how tough was it to rationalize that this was probably the end of your career?
Well, John, I didn't think about that immediately. For whatever reason, I felt that when I came back to Seattle, because I had failed the physical in Arizona, that I was just going to be back on the Seattle roster. You know, the trade didn't go through. I was going to be on the Seattle roster. And I guess because I was so shocked that when they told me this in Arizona, that I didn't rationalize that this was the end of my career. And until I got back to Seattle and I found out that the general manager had made certain statements, and my lawyer, Lee Steinberg, said, well, let's just figure out what we're going to do from here. And I'm basically saying to him, well, we'll go back to we'll get back on the Seattle roster. And he said, no, that's not going to happen. Basically, you're done. And that's when the reality set in, and the shock, was unprecedented. I mean, I was depressed. I was angry. I was mad. I just couldn't believe that I'm 28 years old in the prime of my career, and the thing that I was best at doing in my life, playing football, was over at 28.
Sad. Take us through.
Couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I know. It's just you're robbed of what you were so good at doing, and then to have all that happen. How has life been since being out of football? There was a period. As you well know, probably. I went through dialysis treatments and 3 days a week, and got very fortunate that in 1991, I believe it was, after 3 years of doing dialysis treatment, I was called and I got a kidney transplant, and that lasted for about 4 or 5 years. Went back on dialysis again, and then we moved to Virginia and got a call again for another kidney transplant. And I drove up to Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland. Got another kidney transplant, and that's the one that I've been on for all these years later. Got that one in 2000, and so been on that kidney for since. I'm still on it today. But I'm doing well. Still have to be careful about things that I eat and the amount of salt intake and stuff like that. But I'm doing pretty good, as long as the kidney lasts. I mean, it probably won't last me for the rest of my life, and I've already decided that should this one reject, I won't do it again. I won't go through the kidney process again. I'll just get back on dialysis and for the rest of my life. So I just take it day by day. I just take it day by day and just hope that the kidney keeps functioning, and I won't have to resort to the final analysis, which is going back on dialysis. Well, let's pray that does well and lasts as long as possible. And also, let's just hope but have confidence in the fact that come the day before the Super Bowl, you get the day that you've been waiting for 25 years, the chance to get into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Yeah,
that would be the ultimate. That would be the ultimate under the circumstances and what I've been through. It would be, in some senses, justice.
Yes, it will be. And, of course, I'll be there in the room hoping to administer justice. Hey, Kenny, thank you so much. I offer you premature congratulations. If not, I'll start beating up people in the room. So
yeah, there you go.
Get physical.
Well, thanks a lot, John. I appreciate talking to you today.
All right, Kenny, thanks.
Good news, everyone! It's time
to ask the professor. Why? Says who?
Because, and says me.
Welcome to Schooled with the Professor. Remember, each week you get a chance to ask me any question relating to the podcast. Just get on Twitter and use the hashtag ClaytonSchooled. This week I talked to Hall of Fame finalist, member of the Senior Committee's recommendation, Kenny Easley, about his career, his life, and his bid for the Hall. Our question this week comes from John in Arkansas, who says, there always seems to be someone on the outside looking in when it comes to the Hall of Fame. Do you ever see voting or the way that they allow people changing in the future as far as the votes? Well, not really. I think that there's always going to be some adjustments. And I think there's always going to be, the fact that you want this hall to be special. I mean, certainly it'd be great to sit there and say, all right, let's take 10 in. But that's not going to happen. Each year we take in 5. We also have the senior, and, that kind of alternates because now we have a contributor category, and we do a rotation where one year, like this year, it's going to be 2. It's Jerry Jones and Paul Tagliabue in the contributors, and then one player who's Ken Easley. And, of course, we all hope that Ken Easley gets voted in. But, that's one of the reasons we have the senior committee, because what happens is, and I think people don't understand some of the difficulty, but also some of the pleasure of voting. And, of course, the difficulty is you get a list of 15 guys that we voted through, and they make the 15 finalists. We have to say no to 10. We're not saying that they're not Hall of Famers. What we're saying is that they didn't make it this year, and then they go back and with the hope of making it in future years. And so because of that, sometimes it takes guys time to get in. And of course, we're taking 11 different positions, the best at those positions, and then trying to make judgments as like who can go in this year and who can go in. But what ends up happening is you have a guy like Ken Easley, who is just so great, but his career was only 7 years. And so now you're matching a 7-year career to a 13 and 14-year career. And so what ends up happening is that we have the senior category to go back and fix any wrongs. Like, for example, so many years Ray Guy, probably the best punter that anybody saw, didn't get into the Hall of Fame. Well, once he got to be the senior, he got in. And so that's all set up. And it's a shame you have to wait 25 years, but that's just the rules that we deal with. And certainly you want the Hall to be special. And, of course, the senior committee, they do such a great job. They meet in the summer. They try to get the right number of people that come in for at least reference and talk about some of the great players who didn't get in and kind of put a little bit of a pecking order in. Like this year, Ken Easley jumped to the top and was now able to make it in. And so I don't really see changes. I mean, there's going to be some adjustments. I mean, for example, this year for the first time, we're going to have 2 players, ex-players, that are going to be in the room voting, James Lofton and Dan Fouts. And we welcome that. They'll be the 47th and 48th people in the room. And we have 46 writers that are going to be in there that have covered the game. And I've been fortunate to vote since 1988. So I'm sure as time goes on, there's going to be some adjustments. I mean, for example, maybe in a couple of years, if not enough coaches get in that deserve, they might put coaches in the contributor category. But that's down the line. But overall, we think that we have a pretty good system, but it's not perfect. And that's why the senior committee's there to fix up some of the things that didn't get in there. And that's why Ken Easley now has a chance to get in. And we're so thankful for that. That's it for this week's edition of Schooled. Thanks for listening. Class dismissed.